Hello and welcome to our second session today. My name is Wiebke and I will accompany you through this session. We want to explore the term and ideas of openness together with you to see whether there are limits of it and where those are and how they can be overcome. We are going to hear three very short project presentations of our speakers, hear them reflect on openness, and then open this discussion to questions and input from all of you. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to raise your virtual tiny hand or use the chat. But first, I want to introduce our three great speakers to you. First, there's Melanie Grant. Melanie is a collection development manager at the Wellcome collection in London. She studied history of modern art and became a librarian. Melanie will give us a short insight into the recent acquisition of artworks at the collection. And second, we have Ilse van Zeeland, who works as a freelance exhibition curator and conceptualizer now, but will focus her presentation on the life science exhibition she developed as a content developer at the Naturkunde in Leiden. And third, we have Ines Theileis, singer and artist from Berlin and lead of the ensemble Salon Fähig, producing science variety shows at Berlin venues and since last year at the Museum für Naturkunde Berlin. So clear the stage for our speaker, each facing the difficult task to present their work and views of an openness in only 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So please, Mel, the stage is yours.
Morning, everyone. It's really great to be here. I'm just going to screen share my presentation. So hopefully you can all see this. There we go. So I am the collections development manager for Wellcome Collection. So we're a museum and library. Our vision is to challenge the way we all think and feel about health by bringing together medicine, science, art, and life. I'm currently commissioning new artworks for our collections by 3 artists that are responding to the UK government's handling of coronavirus. For us commissioning for our collections, oh, sorry, I think there's a bit of a delay on my slides, so here we go. But for us, commissioning for our collections is new. Although there has been a lot of commissioning for exhibitions. So what I'm doing with this work is I'm collaborating with our exhibitions team to bring together their curatorial expertise and my collections expertise to do something new that will help us commission new work as a new strand of collecting. So I've been thinking about the limits of openness, why this work is important to us, why it's challenging us, and I'd be interested to hear your reflections on the following points. So the first is timing. So this work will be permanently preserved in our collections. It will be accessible to the public and available for exhibition and loan when the time is right. But these stories are really powerful. Some are actually quite traumatic. So we might not be ready to see or hear them anytime soon. So by commissioning for the collections rather than exhibition, we're actually giving people the chance to choose when the moment is right for them and giving us the opportunity to choose when might be the right moment to exhibit. Also, legal considerations have come up a lot around this work, particularly data protection, protecting the individuals, protecting their stories. And what that might mean is some of the material that we're creating will have to be closed for access for a long time. So there will be openness, but that openness comes much further down the line. Also ethical considerations. So we wanted to be responsive to the needs of artists working in a pandemic. We decided to have not have a distinct, strict kind of deadline for delivery. So then we could be more inclusive. We could bring a wider range of voices into the collections. And we've also built it into the commissioning brief that we want underrepresented voices to come through in this work. And we're experimenting with newly developed principles of care that allows us to have an open discussion with collaborators about what they need from us. And we're trialing a wellbeing fund to support artists beyond the standard commissioning fee. And another thing that came up has been accessibility. So we're asking that the artworks have principles of access built into them. If accessibility becomes part of the work, it can really open it up to wider, more diverse audiences. And another interesting challenge has been trust. Building relationships solely online has been difficult, but for some people that isn't a reality just during a pandemic. And I think we need to listen to those people to create a more open, accessible future and not just return to some of our past ways of working. So for us, really, openness, I think, has to be in everything we do, how we work, how we think, the things that we put out into the world, even if some of those things can't actually be shared in the immediate future. So that was it from me. I will stop sharing and hand over.
Yeah, thank you so much, Melanie, for this insight into the collection practice at Wellcome Collection. And now I would like to clear the stage for Ilse to show her presentation and tell us about Leiden.
Okay, I will start sharing. So hello everybody, and I'm happy to be here on this very nice conference so far. I'm working now as an independent museum specialist, but I used to work for Theileis, the Dutch Natural History Museum in the Netherlands. And I will talk a bit about life science, the project that we did a few years back. Basically, our life science was the result of our experiment, how to be an open museum, open as opposed to closed museum. We felt our museum was telling beautiful stories about nature and about our collections, but not so much about ourselves. What is the work that we do? And more importantly, why do we do it? And instead of just telling these stories through an exhibition, we wanted to make a way that the visitors could discover this for themselves. On this slide, you see the result of life science that opened in 2011, and you see what we call the work street. There were colleagues integrating mollusk collections in an open space where visitors could just watch and ask them questions if they felt they needed to ask questions. And this is the life science as it is right now. Naturalis reopened just a year ago with a complete new museum, and life science was there. Bigger, better, and more beautiful, as we like to joke. But more importantly, it's also free. So visitors can come for free to this exhibition space without having to pay tickets first. And in this life science, we could recreate and adapt from all the lessons we've learned from the other life science. So that was really great. And a lot of things stayed, actually. We still have taxidermy sessions happening. We have in the spotlights where scientists or basically any of our colleagues could shed a light on the work they do in our museum. We have the work street where scientists can book a place and they can go and work. We have a dino lab where fossils that we digged up are being prepared. We have live streams when things might be too smelly, like when we have a whale that's stranded and we dissect it. We can do a live stream there. And so, well, basically every day is different in life science. And for this workshop, I wanted to share two thoughts with you. What was important for us during the process of the development of this life science project was that open is not the same as transparent. With this, I mean, like with transparency, you make the visitors see what you're doing, but it's very hard to have visitors interact with the people who are actually doing the work. So we decided not to use any glass in the life science space, at least as far as possible. The second point that was really driving us through the development of the project is the sentence, "It is what it is." It actually came from a poem, but giving us the opportunity to think like, this is honestly showing us what to the audiences what we are doing. And we are not making a show. In life science, it's not the goal to entertain the people, but the goal is to open up for our audiences. And well, however, that's not always as easy as it seems. Visitors and colleagues both appreciate this exhibition highly. And if you want to have a look for yourself, on our website, you can walk through our museum virtually, and it's a nice way to look at it, you know, if you would like. So that's my presentation so far. So I hand over the screen back to Wiebke.
Thank you, Ilse. Thank you so much. I already have some exciting connecting points for the discussion, but first I'm curious to hear the third project. So Ines, stage is yours.
Thank you, Wiebke. Hello to everyone. My name is Ines Theileis, and in contrary to Ilse, we do a show. And we do that because I think one of the main phrases that leads me in my work is dare to know. This is one of the center phrases of the Enlightenment in Europe, I think. Habe mutig deines eigenen Verstandes zu bedienen in German. So it's even be courageous enough to think. And sometimes I think that we all forgot to encourage people, that thinking is fun. And this is what my work tries to do, encouraging people to think and have fun with thinking. So I will share I just will share some pictures with you, because this is, oh, that was the wrong, excuse me, I try to share it again. I don't see it. Do you see it?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, perfect. I do not. Okay. Whatever. Shit. It doesn't. Here we are. Okay. This is what it looks like. I do a science variety show, and we did in the Museum for Naturkunde, and I'm very, very honored that we were allowed to do that. We did it with Corona rules. We live streamed it, so there was no audience. And yeah, we are very happy and proud that it was possible to do, even though we missed the audience. And this show has 3 elements or 4 elements. One is me. I'm hosting the show. I'm a singer. I'm a classical singer. I do sing in the show. We speak about objects. We do present crazy stories. I always chose the funny ones. So we are very free what we want to speak about. And next to me, as you might see, sits Philip Golle. Philip Golle is a hula hoop artist, and he's also a member of the Berlin queer scene. And he's part of the discussion. And he comments and he helps, and it's very funny. Of course, we also have scientists who try to keep everything serious enough for a museum. But the interaction between these 2 bubbles, our artist bubble, Berlin artist bubble, and the scientist bubble, can be very funny, the clash. And this is what we use in our show. And as you can see, we put them in a nice context. We decorated the museum. It was really great fun. Thanks for that opportunity. And I add some music and live bands from Berlin. I add, and they play along songs in between our discussions, the themes we discuss, but also I sing with them. So there is a connection between me and the scientists. There's a connection between me and the musicians. And I try to keep the talk going between all of us. And then there's always some weirdness, some acrobats, some queer clowns, or whatever. Every show has something where you think, did that really just happen? This is what I try with our work. So yeah, what we do in this show is we just speak about basics, simple things. A person who has no clue about a subject could be interested in. We do that on eye level, because I think whether you're a musician, you're an acrobat, or you're a scientist, we all trained our skills for a very, very, very long time. We can relate to be the weirdo in the room. We can relate to be amazed by something no one else might understand that deeply. So with that, we seemed to build our own bubble, and it was fun and it was beautiful. And with that, we tried to build enthusiasm and amazement and maybe bring some laughter and even relaxation to people in a situation where they listen to science. And with that, I think we can bring people to the point that they dare to know. Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. We now have heard 3 very different projects, but equally fascinating. And I really have already one question regarding, I think, all three of you. And that would be, like Ilse pointed out, openness is not the same thing as transparent, but what does it have to do with the limits of openness? Can you be, so when is the time to show something? When is the time right? Mel mentioned, or when to show what to whom, Ilse mentioned, or what are the stories we are going to tell? How do we choose objects? Do we make that transparent or not? Do you think that is a key question to the limits of openness?
Well, you point out that the process of being open is very important. And I think you can't be open just like that, because it's not in our genes of the Institute. We are protective. Our main point is to conservation, the collection. So you have to allow yourself for a path to learn how it is for your institution to open up and which points you want to open up. And in the process of life science, we've also discovered that it has a lot to do about ourselves as science communicators and science educators. We are used to talk to the people and talk to the audiences and design exhibitions to do so. Being open also meant that we have to change sometimes our job, I felt, and becoming not only communicators, but mainly more facilitators. So to be able to facilitate the people and the collections to be open to the audiences. And this is not done over one night, I felt.
And I think something that's really key for us, which I was sort of touching on there, is how we work together as an organization, because I think there's not always necessarily even openness between departments. So what I want to kind of really start with is like breaking those barriers down between departments and start with the openness there. And then we can really start bringing more people into the conversation once we have done that internally.
I come from a totally different world where openness is, you should be, otherwise you shouldn't become an artist. There should be a kind of openness you develop in your life. And what I see in the work I do with the museum is, if the attitude is right of the people, then you can do a lot of things. And then it's not even a problem that some things you can't open, you can't do, because there's so much that even with that, you can build the feeling of openness. And I think that's much more important. And on the other, and I also think that also the audience needs to be open. And this is also a process. So it's not just the museum that needs to open, also the audience needs to be willing, or I try with my work to build a willingness in our audiences to listen to your new ways of communicating, also building a motivation to do that. So it's from both sides, I think. And it's an attitude, yes.
I just saw that there was a question from in the chat that fits very well to what Ines just said. How can we make open conversation also inclusive so that the audience feel belonged, having a stake in the conversation?
May I say, as a person who works with 2 queer clowns and as a woman who speaks on stage, we just do it. I just check when I do my casting that we are inclusive. We don't show the old balances who's talking, who's allowed to say something. We just change it. I had a man on high heels and with makeup on stage. I was the one who had less makeup. So, and it was just, no one really realized it at that point when we did the show. We did it 3 times and it seems not to be a thing. We just do it. We just put these people there and we just have them there on eyesight or eye level with the scientists, and it works out beautiful. And people accept it, it seems, till now. Yeah.
I don't know, maybe.
Question too. I think when you design an open museum, you also design for, at least we try to design also for dialogue. And it's dialogue between scientists and visitors that are in our museum. It is, they come from different worlds. In one hand, they have different education levels. For example, the one has a lot of knowledge on the subject, the other one doesn't have. So I think for us, it was very important to for this to take our hands off of it and create a safe enough environment where audiences would feel safe, safe enough to ask a question towards our scientists, for example, or the people who are working there. We actually had to encourage it, because it's when people are working, you don't want to disturb them all the time. So it was a kind of politeness. And what we were more or less starting to regulate then was that we start to invite people actively to ask questions. And then basically we take our hands off, because then it's between them, and it's not, there's no need, for example, for educating, or there's no goal in this conversation. I think it can be about everything. And since we were doing a lot of mollusks, for example, we didn't care if they were talking about the holiday destinations where you could find the nicest shells. And I think this is important to really create an atmosphere where no question is wrong and any conversation is good.
I think we had the subject of good travels, destinations. We had that in our show too, and it was about mollusks too. And so, yeah, and it shouldn't be forbidden to say funny things and trivial things and crazy things. Go sideways. That should be very important. That because people have different perspectives on subjects, and so they have different interests. Some are interested in more musical side of something, or more literature, or really just the scientific side, or just the historic side. If you put it all together, everyone might find something, and we could all meet. So that the museum is a place where we meet with different interests and still have maybe one subject we talk about. Yeah.
I think at Wellcome, we have a huge program of all different kinds of engagement in all different kinds of departments. But my role is trying to lay down the foundations within our collections and advocate within our collections to those teams, so they really understand what we have and start to think about how it could be used from the very beginning. And I think that's maybe something we didn't do enough of in the past. So making those connections across the organization with the people that are going out there and actually doing the direct engagement, and also taking feedback from, you know, market research, audience research that is happening in other parts of the organization, is actually really important to bring that learning that those teams are doing back to what I'm doing, so that they're not disconnected, so that everything is playing into each other.
Yeah, to take up some other questions that came up here in the chat. How do you engage people? So you all mentioned, so to encourage people to ask questions, to encourage to think, to encourage to engage with whatever you are offering. But maybe you could name an example where you get more concrete into how you really try to engage people to be part of it, to encourage to engage more and deeper with the topic, with the show, with the exhibition, or with the artwork.
If I may, as a stage person, this is our everyday job. as a stage person, you always need to engage people. You always need to build a contact, stabilize that contact, hold it, and develop it in a show. This is what we do. This is part of our job. Otherwise, we might not even have chosen that profession if we couldn't do that. So, and that's very different, I think, from a scientist. And I think that's very different from how a museum normally approaches things. So, and I also see that when we create the show, I kind of know about the timing of the show, what it needs, what intensity it needs, what energy it needs. And this is something that's kind of maybe an expertise that comes from our side, from the professional musicians and acrobats I bring on stage. We bring that in this case. So maybe I'm not so sure whether this is really the job of scientists, or I don't know whether it could be the job of exhibitions, but this is something artists, stage artists, are very good at. We can do that. And we are here. We have time. We like that work. It is really a great work. And the artists I work with are happy to work in a place where what they transport is not just have fun and entertainment. No, it's for a good thing. It's for teaching. It's for environment. So they kind of like to be in this place with this level and what your places, the museums, have to tell. So that's maybe kind of surprising, but it's very beautiful.
And I would say I can't really speak to our entire engagement program, but what I want to do with the commissions that I'm working on at the moment, and we haven't started this yet, but we really want to think about how we put those out in the world. And I really want that to be artist-led. And I think that's quite important, especially when we're trying to operate in a world that's slightly different to what we were used to before. So let's make the creative people that we're working with the center of that and work collaboratively, rather than maybe just trying to put something online and leave it there, or, you know, try and do something really interesting with that work. But it won't happen until next year. So I will let the world know when it does happen.
Please.
Wow, yeah, that's maybe you shared that with us so that we can see that all. So, and maybe also to Ilse, the question to have an example of how you really encourage people to engage deeper. That does not necessarily has to involve a question they have to the researcher, but how can you really make sure people have the chance to be engaged and in all of their interests, or however different the people are that come to the exhibition of life sciences?
Well, like in life science, there's a whole lot of things happening, and it's all the time different. So we have different formats. If there's people working in the area, for example, they know what they're doing. We had the luxury to experiment with this in the first part in the old museum, and we know that an open attitude, for example, by the people who are working, and inviting the people to address them sometimes questions could already help. In the design of the exhibition, you can already see that it's clear that you can ask questions, for example. We also have facilitated shows where we always put a lot of effort where the scientist gets questions from the audience and vice versa. So there is an interaction, but that's more guided, so to speak. We have them created in the older one. We had them write little plates to give more context of what they were doing. So that would ignite maybe some questions already for the visitors. So in a way, we tried on a wide diversity of things. So I guess it's still trial and error in some ways. And other things really work very well, and then it goes by itself almost.
Well, thank you. We got a whole lot of more questions, so I'm trying to organize that a little bit. So one was about the evaluation. So how do you evaluate your products or project outcomes in a way, and how do you do that? And yeah, so maybe we start with that. So
I could say a little bit about what we're doing at the moment. So with the commissioning, that's part of a wider piece of work, which comes under a banner of what we're calling the common challenge, which is trying to figure out how to work in this new strange world. But we've got external evaluators that are coming in. They're interviewing our staff. They're also going to be working with some of our external collaborators to try and pull all of that together to see if the aims that we set ourselves at the beginning of this were actually achieved. So for us, yes, that's external assessors coming in to look at the work we've done.
I don't have anything to say about evaluation. That's the job the others do. And I'm very happy and pleased that they do that.
Well, I guess we always evaluate our products, but it's not always done in a scientific way. Because there is a lot of things to evaluate. If the show is working, yes or no, it's just a discussion between people. And I think it's important because what we said is what it is. We had a discussion with the marketing department, for example, saying, yeah, but the people say some parts are boring. And they say like, well, we have to do something about it. On the other hand, I would say like, but why? Because they are allowed to find the things we do boring. At least they had an open, they could find it out for themselves by seeing and maybe by discussing. And it is their conclusion. And well, hopefully we try to change this, but it's not a goal in itself, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Another very interesting question, I think, is how do you create safe spaces? So I think that's something in the moment we are going to be open. We are encouraging people to engage, to have discussions in exchange on eye level. We always have to take care that it's a safe space they are in, that they can share their thoughts. So how do you do that in your projects?
If I may, because there's one thought I had before about that. I don't know whether this is in every country, but this is a cultural thing. In Germany, we make a difference between high culture and entertainment. We do that in music. These are totally different aspects to study. We even do that with taxes. So high culture is tax free. And if it's just entertainment, you need to pay the normal taxes, for example. And I see also, and there's also an attitude to that. So entertainment is there. So circus would be entertainment, for example, and opera would be high culture in very old European terms, and they are still existing. I can speak about the classic world. They are still existing, these terms and these judgments about that. And they, in my opinion, they don't help. And what I see till now in the museums is always, and when it comes to working with artists and working with art, it's mostly high culture. Mostly, not always, but mostly. So, and what I do in my work is I behave like a circus. Oh, I do let our show behave like a circus show. But within this show, there is an aria, there is science, and there is all this high-level discussion. And I know about high culture aesthetics, and I use them, but I use them in a way that people think, oh, this is just entertainment. I watched that because people are trained to watch entertainment and now, okay, this is easy to consume. I behave as if everything I have is easy to consume, or we offer with our show. And then people don't even sometimes realize that it's more. And so I think the old categories, and I'm not sure whether they exist everywhere in the world or this is a very German thing, I don't know, but in Germany this really exists in paintings and it exists in music and I think even in TV. I think we need to overcome that and that attitude.
Any more comments to the safe spaces for discussion? Say, maybe Mel? Yeah.
Yeah, so we do quite a lot of work on creating safe spaces, and I think a lot of it really begins with our front of house staff and making sure that they're trained and supported, and that's an ongoing process. And we often change the kind of training and support depending on what the exhibition is, because we're a gallery that often shows material about health. It can be quite difficult for visitors coming in. So making sure that our staff are properly trained to deal with that is really important. Making sure there are things like decompression spaces sometimes. So we've had spaces with kind of cushions and beanbags, places where people can sit and kind of think about what they just saw, and also getting in external kind of inclusive design consultants to help us think through how people would move through the spaces, where are those moments where they might need a little bit more time, and a moment where they could have a break from the content they might be seeing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. I'm a bit overwhelmed by all those questions, so I have to kind of try to organize that a little bit. So one very concrete question was how to open from within an institution. If you have any advices coming from institutions or from projects and perspectives that are very open, engaging, and have different actors in them, blurring kind of the boundaries. So do you have any advice for other institutions on how to go into that direction?
If I can answer, I think when we started, it was we wanted to open the museum. It was a kind of project at first, and we had a lot of people agreeing with the idea in all levels of the organization. Then we got the luxury in a way, I guess, that we could call it an experiment. And when calling it an experiment, the goal is not to succeed immediately, it's to gather knowledge on the way. And it also gave room to make mistakes. And so whenever we would say like, okay, let's have you working in the exhibition space, of course, nobody was really cheering at that moment directly. Not everybody. Now we could say, well, let's try and let's give it a go and see what happens. And whatever would happen would give us insights in what was going on. So basically I'm saying like, don't see it as a project, but as a process. Have room for mistakes and trials, and also start to have open conversations about why things are working and why not. And as a project team, we were, again, facilitators of listening very well to the people, what they were saying. Often they were saying something else that they were meaning to say, like saying like, yeah, but I have to take care that, that I tell nice stories to the audiences. And we say like, no, that's not per se your talk, your role. You can just be yourself and do your work. And if you find it difficult, then we can find ways to help you with that. So it was really listening and finding problems, finding solutions to problems all the way. So that's a very different process than just creating an exhibition, for example.
Yeah, I think we call everything at Wellcome an experiment, and it's actually, it is quite helpful because it does, I mean, it does give us a little bit of room there for going, okay, well, this worked, this didn't work, and like, we're just trying this out, let's see where it goes. And I think fostering that kind of attitude is actually really, really helpful. And I think for me personally, what's been really helpful is just getting out and speaking to as many people as I can in the organization and really advocating for the collections and the expertise of the staff that work with the collections and what value we can bring to the work that other people are doing. And it doesn't it's not something that happens quickly or easily. It can take a lot of time. But I do feel like it's really made a huge difference to how people are now interacting with particularly my team, and the kinds of work we're doing now have started to shift because of that.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Ines.
So then I would just add, I mean, I'm talking with a hula hoop artist and with scientists. So no one expects that to go well. No one expects that to be totally normal. And if we succeed with that, and actually succeeding means also in the end, someone is laughing because it's something is so stupid or crazy or whatever, we even then have succeeded. People start thinking, okay, if these two can manage, or these three can manage, then we might also could be involved in that communication to see that people who speak with each other for 1 hour, or in our last show, 2 hours, who come from such different bubbles, Berlin Underground, Berlin Science, or scientists, if we can manage, it seems like the audience feels more encouraged also to minimum to try to get into a conversation and into an open conversation where they expect that they might understand something. It's not this, so I like that.
So I think the experimental character of it was very strong in all three of your stories. Yes. So maybe that is one of the most prominent advice here, that to call something an experiment and try it out and find best practices and find also ways to get others on board with it inside the institution to take part in the experiment and then be more open. We also had the very general question, why do you think openness is important? Maybe that might be like a question to talk for another hour, but maybe some really brief statement why you think it should be like that, or is it that important?
Just an immediate reaction to that from me is that, the collections that we hold are not ours. They're everyone's. So for us to not be open is doing a disservice to the humans of the world, and also the collections, but more importantly, people, because we're caring for them, we're looking after them, but they're not really ours. And I think that's really important to remember.
Mm-hmm. Yes, totally agree with what Mel was saying on that perspective. At the same time, also when it's about, for example, the problems that we're facing right now in the world, that we can't really only stop by showing how beautiful biodiversity is. I think we can have the chance and opportunity right now by opening up the museum to talk more in detail or more specific about how our museum is addressing to these kind of topics. And we can invite visitors to talk about that if they wish. So I think the process of science and the scientific collections and the scientific knowledge gained from this is interesting by itself, but also start to be important.
Yeah, thank you. I think that was an important point for everyone here when we're talking about collections and science, that it's not ours, that we're actually just taking care of it and looking after it. So, yeah.
But I also, yes. And I imagine always the museum as the living room of our society. So this is my personal idea when I go to a museum. These are our living rooms. We pay it with our taxes. We can be proud of that. So I just had some really crazy moments in the Berlin museums where I had this feeling, and I was so amazed by the beauty of these museums, and that I felt these are our spaces. So in a democracy where we need people to engage, I think a museum could be a place where we practice that. That's my vision for that. We want to practice.
I totally agree. So we get a question about if there's experience with also opening the process of curating and conceptualizing exhibitions with visitors and including their ideas into the exhibition. So is there something in your institutions that's maybe more towards Ilse and Melanie, if there's a experience with including visitors into the process of curating an exhibition.
I'm going to be completely honest, I've never curated an exhibition, so I'm not
Me neither. Me neither.
I guess in a way I curate the collections, but not exhibitions. So I'm probably not the best person to speak to that at Wellcome, I'm afraid.
I was, please, you.
Sorry. Yes, actually, no, not as probably the question is intended in a kind of co-producing or cooperating process, mainly because we have been working really hard to create a whole new museum, and in this it's unfortunate, but it's so complex that it's very hard to run another project on the side for this. But I think it's interesting to open this up, and we have now, since the museum is open, a lot of opportunities to find a way to do this, because of course it is an interesting process that you can have by co-creation.
I wouldn't call it co-creation, what we did. I mean, I went just through the collection and was like, can we have that? Oh, that's beautiful. I mean, that is not really curating an exhibition. It's more, and then the collection employees and the scientists always explained everything to me. So it was not, I think, a typical curating thing. It was more a crazy artist's way of experiencing the museum. It was fun.
Well, I don't know, but we had some experiments with that in the Natural History Museum here in Berlin. So maybe one of my colleagues wants to join the discussion to give insight there from the exhibition department, but maybe later. So I will show a sign here from the technical staff maybe. And I will pick up another question from these vast variety of questions that came up in the chat already. So one is if there are artists and scientists in residency programs to support such projects. I don't really know who is this addressed to, but I guess Melanie, because it's kind of the link between the collection and the artists. So if it's artists in residencies, or how do you commission that?
Yeah, so one thing that comes immediately to mind is we have a space called the Hub. And the Hub is really a sort of collaborative space where groups can come together and put in bids to have a residency in there for, I think, up to 2 years. And we've had projects around things like sleep, where it's been a combination of scientists, doctors, artists. At the moment, we've got a group in there called Heart and Soul, and that's a group that is primarily artists with learning disabilities, and they're doing some really interesting work at the moment. But I think that's a really great space where people have it for a decent amount of time, and they're supported throughout that time, and they can bring in all kinds of different collaborators. And that's the whole point, is that it's really varied in terms of the people that we bring into those projects. So I would say that's probably the kind of biggest and most successful kind of residency that we have.
Yeah, thank you. I got the sign that Uwe would like to join, and I already see him up there, maybe to talk about the experience with co-creation and opening curatorial processes, I think.
Right, since you asked us to do so, I won't leave you alone in front of the camera. So, well, we started to experiment with those things as well. We are probably not as far as other institutions, but what can I share from an experience perspective? It's really interesting if you open up the conceptual stage and allow visitors to join certain workshops or certain meetings you have with your team, and give them an opportunity to give their opinion on, you know, what objects means, on purposes, on storylines. We are, and probably I'm the first thing that comes to my mind is more towards what are the situations where it is easy to open up those processes. It is when you are, when you're not risking too much. So what we've been doing here in Berlin was inviting visitors to look at several objects that come directly from our collection. There was no interpretational help. There was no introduction. And we had groups coming in looking at different different collection parts, and just let them speak about what they think. Are there questions coming up? Do they find something interesting? And what is so great about these situations is that they come up with ideas that and they see things that I personally don't see anymore. I'm sorry that I'm no outsider anymore. I'm such an insider, and my view on things is like that. I like to think of myself being open as possible, but I need other brains to become open again. And we are going, so far it has not, well, we did a couple of student projects that really turned into exhibitions. We haven't done it with open to any visitor things so far, but we're going to do it in a couple of years when we have to close down the museum. The idea is to spread into the city with some sort of partisan exhibitions. To stay in, you know, to be part of the social and cultural life of Berlin, even in the times when we're closing. But that's then a situation. What I mean is that we don't. There's not much risk doing it. Then mixing like visitor curated exhibitions with like curator curated exhibitions, and give the public a possibility to see the different perspectives. Probably that's enough.
Yeah, thank you. So I think I will take up one last question probably, because we are already approaching the end of the session. So that was the question on the role that technologies play in the openness concept, and to connect it with the question if some of you have experience to transfer the openness approaches to politics, and how do you had that experience, or so yeah.
I could say something straight away about technology. So we've had a huge digitization program underway for a long time now. And Wellcome's kind of ambition is to essentially digitize everything within our collections at some point. And I think it's been very interesting over the past few months to see how those digital collections have become the only way that people could actually see our collections. And it's given us quite an interesting view of how the way we've worked through our collections and the way we've digitized them has created a very specific kind of online collection that might not necessarily be what we would want it to be, because we never thought we'd be in a situation where that was the only way people could access the collections. So I think it's going to make us rethink a little bit now how we go around the kind of digital technological aspects. And I would say with the commissions that we're doing, they've primarily ended up being digital works. And again, I think because at the moment that feels like the most immediate way to connect with people. I'm thinking about transferring openness approaches to politics. I mean, I feel like everything we do is political. So everything I've said today applies completely. Like, I don't see politics as something separate from what we're doing. It's part of everything. And I'll hand over if anyone else has any reflections.
Yeah, I mean, also my work wouldn't have worked without technology, without the internet. We live streamed to our show with music, so all this equipment. If there wouldn't have been people who know about technology and about all this, there wouldn't be a chance. I mean, the team got much bigger, but even without that, when I play live, I always have a light designer with me, so a light artist who knows about technology, who knows about our artistic approach, but also knows about the technology. And what I can say is it's very good to have that person, because with this, the technology plays with you. If me as a person who's not so much interested in technology, it's mostly a playing against each other, this technology and me. But if you have someone in your team who knows how to speak with technicians, how to speak with sound engineers, the whole attitude, everything goes easier. So have someone who is on the side of the technicians helps. And I totally value their work, but I also accept also they have a different speaking attitude, a language and everything. And I don't have that language. So I have someone for that. And that's something I can recommend. Yeah. And with the politics, I'm sorry to add with the politics, I always think that we forget always to inform people in a good way that they feel they want to engage in politics. So my show is not about politics or about something to critical discussion. My show is about my work wants to be about, let's be together for a while, wherever you come from, what's your bubble, spend an hour together and be brave enough to talk to each other, because I think that's the basis for better politics in future time.
Well, I think I am was informed that our session is now unfortunately over already, so we did not answer quite all questions, but I think most of you three are joining for the next coffee break as well, so maybe take the chance and ask your questions to the responding speakers, and I will now give the stage back to my colleagues. Who will inform you more about the programming. So thank you very much to all three of you.